Striker Scorpion 82 is now sponsored by Warhammer Combat Cards, a card battle game featuring your favourite Citadel miniatures from the 40k universe. Build your army decks, dominate opponents in player versus player action, collect and upgrade cards to fit your strategy, improve their power and unlock unique traits. Choose from all 40k factions, take part in campaigns based on iconic 40k battles, rise to the top of the leaderboard and win glory. Free to download and play. Link is in the video description below or on the channel homepage, and by using the unique link it helps support the channel. Thanks and enjoy the game. Right, welcome to another how-to video. In this episode I hope to show you how we set up our games for Warhammer 40,000, so it's a chance to show you how we set up our terrain and the boards for our games of 40k. Terrain is such an important element of Warhammer 40,000. No matter how decent your army is painted up, you really do need decent terrain to act as a good backdrop for the army as well, and it can really add to your immersive experience of Warhammer 40,000. So there's some simple tips to share here, right from sort of foundational stuff, and then the terrain that we place on top, and then show you some of the accessories and things that we use just to enhance our tables as well. A lot of people have been asking questions, how do you set up the terrain and so on. So this video just to give you the lowdown on that aspect of the hobby. So we'll get stuck here, and there's a number of things to show you here, so we'll just build this up from foundation. As you can see, this table's mostly set up, but the first stage is to provide your foundation. So for most of our games we're using battle mats. We use mats from gamemat.eu. Link for them is in the video description below, but they do a wide variety of battle mats at different sizes, some of them double-sided as well. And then that acts as your foundation, so that gives you a colour palette. So you can see from this urban mat here, you've got your greys, rust colours going on, you've got chevron colours also, so that acts as your foundation as far as colours are concerned, and also for the structure of your table as well. It's marking out some boundaries here with some roads, so it gives you an idea of where to set the terrain as well. If you want it to be realistic, obviously you can place the terrain wherever you want. If you're constricted, like a tournament for example, then the terrain may need to go in certain positions, but for thematic games like we run most of the time, we try and stick to the structure of the mat here, so you can see the buildings, for example, just running to the edge of the road where they should be, and then keeping the roads generally clear. Now there's two ways of going about setting up terrain. For us, we preset the terrain and then play our games on top of it, but obviously there's also the other way where yourself and your opponent will set up the terrain together, alternating placing pieces on the board and so on, as per the rules. Much of the tips I'm going to share here will work either way. You can both of you set up the main terrain pieces together and then add on the realism and extra bits after that, so it'll work either way around. But for us, usually it's a case of setting up the whole board, and then we work out the mission and the game on top of that. Now, one aspect is the size of the game, so depending on what size or points level or power level of game of 40k you're playing, it will determine the size of the battlefield. So here you'll find it here in the rules just at the start. Battlefields, so incursion size games 44 by 30 inches, strike force size game 44 by 60. It gives you an idea of the size that it should be, and then that depends on the size of the points limit that you're going for as well. So it's incursion points limit is 1,000, strike force is 2,000 points up to that points level. So this is a 6x4, one of the older 6x4 mats, so 60 inches of measure across, and then simply just to add to the theme here, we just use terrain just to mark that boundary, so it looks nice and realistic on the table without interfering too much, but that gives you your natural edge that we play up to for our 2,000 points games of 40k. So that's one tip, you can just use terrain. These pipes are brilliant, tank traps and so on are excellent to use as markers for the edge of terrain without it distracting too much from your setup on the table. So one thing people ask is how long the tables take to set up and put away. Literally a table would take me about 15 minutes to set up and about 10-15 minutes to put away again. It's quite straightforward to do. So the first stage is you lay your mat down, that's your foundation. Then you pick your terrain. If you want a decent themed board, then you want your terrain to match in with the foundation mat that you've chosen. So there's two sets being used here. This Gothic terrain set from GameMat.eu blends in nicely, so these larger pieces of terrain here, and also the industrial terrain set being used in this setup as well. So that's that building, a couple of those buildings across there. There's some Games Workshop terrain being used. This AdMech terrain here is from Games Workshop as well. We start off with this is how I would do it, the larger pieces of terrain first, and get those onto the board, and then position them, and often I'll be moving them around just to try and make sure that things are evenly spread out. And you've got to think, you've got to be fair for the opponent. So we've got some line of sight blocking terrain here, and it makes sense then to have a similar piece across the other side just to balance the board out and make it nice and fair for both sides, and whichever end players end up going for deployment, the terrain's sort of spread evenly around the board. Other thing to bear in mind is access. So people trying to move vehicles and larger models around the table, so you're sort of leaving access to be able to fit models down and then through here as well. So there's good access all the way around the board, no matter how big the models are. It's not it wouldn't be very fair at all if you blocked off access for some vehicles and they can't manoeuvre around the table. So build the table with that in mind. The roads do that naturally here anyway. They're providing boundaries for access and then leaving gaps in between for access as well. So that's the next stage. You've got your foundation done, your larger pieces of terrain placed on the board. You manoeuvre those around first, and when you're happy with the way they've been set up, nice and evenly distributed and a fair representation of the terrain on the board, the next step would be to add your battlefield accessories. So larger stuff like these barrels. So just creating different areas to, there's a nice area that some unit could tuck in and hide behind here. Just a couple of stacked up Munitorum armoured containers. Then little accessories like this is one of the AdMech pieces from Games Workshop. Barrels and things to add on. Just really starts to create little dioramas, little areas of interest that are so easy to set up on the board. Just really enhance the table and really add to the theme that you're trying to create. It's easily done. Just place your pieces of terrain on the board and then your smaller accessories, just spread and distribute those around. There's other things as well. Tank traps look great, easy to, you can spray and put ink on these, paint them up nice and quickly, and then just use those and just tuck them in on different areas on the board as well. So easy to add in accessories onto your tables for 40k. So once that's done, the next stage, the way I would finish off is use things like lichen and then stones and scatter, just to blend the whole thing in, just to make it a little bit more war-torn and realistic. So I'll show you here, a piece of terrain. So place that on the board, put it there, and then we'll go for another piece here. We'll just create like a ruin. Just looks a bit plain here, so the way I then work on that is just to blend it all in. So I've got some stones and scatter. We'll zoom in and take a look. I usually have this in a bag, and I just take it out of the bag and then just randomly place it on around the terrain. So what you've got here is stones that I have actually sprayed to match in with the basing that I have for most of my armies. So here's an example model, and I actually put these stones in a card tray and then just shaking them, rotating them around, just sprayed them with the same grey that I used for my basing. Once that was dry, then flicked some ink on them as well, and that meant that my stones match in exactly with the basing that I have for models. So that's a tip that you can do. You've got large stones, these have all been sprayed here, large stones, smaller stones, so you've got a right mixture. And then also add spare pieces from kits. That's part of a razorback there, I believe. Just sprayed silver and then rust wash is put over the top and then flicked with silver just to highlight it. Little pieces of terrain, bits here, bits of from ruins, spare bits of buildings, just generally painted up and some rust added on. More plates, twisted deliberately, damage marks put on them and then rusted up and dry brushed with silver. Spare weapons look great as well. It's a Tau pulse rifle. There should be there's a las gun in there as well. Easily done, doesn't take very long, but just you can really add to your realism by adding those kind of things in. These all get thrown in the same bag, so it all comes out random. And then what I do is put on the larger stones around here to break up the ruin, and then the smaller stuff just tucked in like so. Like that. And I don't want to be too messy, so I do tidy it up, but it just blends it in where the terrain joins the table. Just use your stones to scatter just to blend the whole thing, and now you've got a lot more realistic look. And then you've got your accessories that you can add on, your weapons that you can leave dumped around, and every terrain setup that you do, you get a unique look and a different look every single time. For little effort really, just for the sake of some stones and some debris, and you've managed to blend that terrain piece in to match in with the rest of the battlefield. So that's pretty much how it works. And then putting things away, because people ask how long does it take to clear the table away. I go pretty much in reverse order. So first of all, I'll pick off the big pieces of terrain, so I'll remove them first when I'm clearing up and get those packed away, put the accessories away, and then on the board all that I'm left with is this stuff, which I then pull the corners of the mat in, and it all comes together in a pile, and then just scrape them, put it off into a box or into a bag ready for you to use next time. So very straightforward as far as packing away is concerned. The mat acts as a nice way of collecting all the bits together for you, and then you're just able to put them away into the bag very easily indeed. So that's pretty much how it works. Depending on what piece of terrain, if it's jungle terrain, you'll see me using different coloured stones, some lich and some bushes, again just to blend the whole thing in. So you're trying to merge your terrain and make it part of the mat, and then stones and scatter, lich and bushes and so on, scrub, that can all help do that very easily indeed. It really is worth investing in terrain. For little effort, you can make some great looking battlefields, and it's just real good fun to play on a nice decent terrain setup. It doesn't take too long to set up, and not much effort at all to make a nice realistic battlefield. So then there's a few other things. Sometimes I use actual models here and incorporate them as part of the terrain. So we're going to do a burnt out tank here, so I might put it up at an angle against a piece of terrain, remove the turret, perhaps the turret's been blown off, and just roll it over, and then use one of these. These are my burning vehicle markers, sort of homemade ones with coins underneath, and then this teddy bear fluff that's been used to build this, sprayed black underneath, grey on top, and then flicked with red, orange and yellow paint just to create the burning effect here. And there's a bit of weight with the coins underneath. There is a full tutorial for these on the channel, the burning vehicle marker tutorial, and then just a case of simply placing it on top just to give you the burning vehicle look. And then I might add a little bit extra here just with the turrets burning. A bit extra there. So this is one that I've made without the coins that I can place into smaller areas for a realistic burning effect. So they're easily built as well. It means you can enhance your terrain by using some of your own spare models as well. And I'd still use these in games, but I can incorporate them into the terrain as well. So you can have a theme of a battlefield that's got a certain faction theme to it. You could be playing a game where it's Astra Militarum against Tyranids, but there's some burnt out Blood Angel vehicles on the board. Perhaps the Tyranids have already destroyed a small Blood Angels force before the Guard have managed to arrive. So you're creating a storyline and a theme just by using some of the models that you have in your own collection. So that's another tip that you can do. The other thing is sometimes you need to mark certain parts of the table. So you can use markers for that, but it's something that's artificial being placed onto a board you're trying to make realistic. So I've found that sometimes using it, again, accessories to mark the table can be much more realistic looking. So for example, the center of this table is being marked by this Terminator on a throne. This is one of the models taken from the Space Hulk set, but the table's being marked. You wouldn't know that really, it's just another piece of realism being added, but it's got an actual in-game purpose as well. Different types of things. There's a dead Terminator there, you could use him to mark the center of the table, or you can just use him to match in with the terrain that you have on the board. And sometimes I might use something like this to mark somewhere on the table, just to teleport Homer for Terminators. Another great way to mark the center of the table. The other thing is objective markers. So I've got my own ones now for the channel, so these are available if you want those. Sets of 6, 40mm across, which is the size of a Terminator base. That's the official size that you'll need for games of 40k as well. But nice objective markers, wherever you get them from, are great for your games as well, and just make sure that they are the correct size. They need to be 40mm across for games of 40k. Link for them, they're on the Etsy store. Link for those is in the video description below. So that's pretty much all the tips I can think of. Literally 15-20 minutes it takes to set the table up. So the first thing is, as long as you lack inspiration, you think, oh, what am I going to do? The first thing I think about is the battle mat. Roll the mat out, and immediately that starts to give you some colours to work from. And then I'll think about what terrain I've got available, then try and build up a table and match it into that mat as much as possible. So that's the way to start, I think. It's a decent battle mat with a good colour scheme on it, and then start building up your terrain from there. So we'll go around this board here just to give you an idea of the different areas that have been created. So just give you inspiration of how you can set up a board. There's a little corner across here. This is just a combination of accessories going on. Some chain link fences that I've made myself, and a Munitorum armoured container. Some barrels just stacked up, these come loose. Some accessories here, and just random configuration, and a bit of AdMech stuff. And then, as talked about earlier on, a little bit of stone and scatter just to blend it in, just a little bit, not too much. Don't want to go too much over the top, and it just blends the whole thing in this corner. Then you've got a larger ruins. There's 3 pieces of terrain configured this way, and then inside there you can see the stones and scatter that I've added in just to blend it in, and then you've got these accessories, bits of broken terrain from tank kits and so on, being added in again just to blend it into the battle mat. Again, an AdMech combination across here, just 2 pieces of terrain joined together. And the great thing about these AdMech bits from Games Workshop is you can go for all sorts of combinations. You can go like that, the terrain can go on top. There's all different ways that can go. You could run pipes in between and join them together that way. So there's never-ending combinations that you can go for. A couple of accessories, and then again some stones and scatter to blend it in. So just come around to the other side, a couple of bits of terrain joined together. Again, just a couple of accessories, 1 and 2, just next to them. And then again, your stones and scatter to blend it in. You can see on this mat here, there's patches of loose stone just modelled or printed onto the design, and then the stones match in nicely with that as well, so they pair up quite nicely. So maybe the order that you go for to start from scratch is choose your favourite battle mat, whichever one you're going to go for. Of course you can create your own battlefield, but the mats are pretty good, roll out nice and flat, they're easy to store, excellent colour palette for you to use, and they're nice and quiet on dice and figure friendly as well. So big fan of the mats, but you can roll those out nice and flat and then use them. And then the idea is that from your mat you can then select your main terrain pieces, whichever ones you're going to go for, and then build up your accessories and then your matching stones and scatter and so on to blend in as well. So I think the first step for you to take is to choose a mat, then think about your larger terrain pieces that you're going to have on top of that mat, and then your accessories after that, and then stone scatter, lich and flock, whatever you're going to use to then act as the blending agent once the terrain has been set up. So that's the order that I would go about choosing and putting terrain together. So it's this is just accessories here. So you've got a few more Munitorum containers and stacking them up, stacked one on top of here just to create an area of interest. Units can hide behind here, climb up on top for elevated positions and so on. Some accessories, and again the stones just scattered in quite randomly just to blend the whole thing in. And with the accessories you can start adding on some great features like these posters here, just printed off the internet on paper, cut out and then stuck on. There's a tutorial for that on the channel to show you how to add posters as well. I mean, they'd look great added onto the buildings as well for your games of 40k. So that's pretty much it. That's how I go about setting up tables for our games of 40k. So your foundation then is your battle mat, or your ready-made terrain, whatever you're going to scratch build yourself, and then from there it's the selection of the larger terrain pieces that you're going to place on the board. And when you do place them, you're spreading them out nice and evenly across the board and fairly, bearing in mind both players involved in the game, and then leaving plenty of access to move through for vehicles and larger models. Then once that's settled where you're going to put those pieces, you're then thinking about battlefield accessories to go on, so things like the larger containers here, and then smaller things like this, to add on, pipes as well, different stuff to add onto the board. Once those are in place, just to finish the whole thing off, it does make a massive difference. Really adds to the realism. Just some simple stones and scatter, some scrub and bushes and so on, just to blend the whole thing in. The idea is it blends from the terrain and then blends into the table, and the whole thing merges together to create the realistic battlefield look. So that's how I put my terrain together. I hope that's a help and assistance to you. So do check out the comments section to see what other experienced 40k players are saying in regards to terrain, and if you do have your own hints and tips, then do leave that in the comment section as well. But that's another video in this series. I've done a number of videos now for this how-to series for Warhammer 40,000. If you've enjoyed the video here, then do hit the thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed already, then do subscribe to the channel, and keep a lookout for more videos in this series. Thanks for watching, and tune in next time.